Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Why don't you give yourself a round of applause for making it? With the snow this morning, we had a little doubts, and I got some emails from our members in like Florida and Southern California, and they were wondering if we were even going to have the program. I think they underestimated the toughness of the Boston crowd. So thanks so much for being here. We've been looking forward to this event for quite some time. I want to thank somebody before we get going, Kristen Todd in the back, who is our VP of Marketing, and apparently didn't think that I was going to acknowledge her by the look on her face. I apologize. But Kristen has been working tirelessly the last several weeks putting this event together, and I will say there were a lot of unforeseen challenges doing it, but nonetheless, she pulled off a great event. So thank you very much, Kristen. And she asked me to make one announcement, and this is only relevant to the folks in Boston. And this is the first time ever, we are having a program tomorrow night. We've never had, I can't remember us ever having two programs in the same month. That was probably Freudian. But I don't think we've ever had two programs in the same month before, but now we actually have them back-to-back nights. So the program is on winning the talent war. It will be a fantastic program. I hope you can all make it. It's at KPMG's offices in the financial district. But mostly what I want to do here is thank Host Analytics, not only for tonight, which is absolutely fantastic, but just for their support generally. They approached us over the summer, and Host Analytics, as you know, they have expertise in data analytics, and they said, we just wanted to do an event for your members. We had a successful live stream event in the spring. They're saying we have some expertise to bring them, but mostly we want to do a fun, classy event. So I met Tim not too long ago. He's a fellow MIT grad. And he spoke at our conference in May, and I said he'd be perfect. So we put this together. Host Analytics took care of everything. So we've got a great night tonight, and it's all because of them. So that said, Dan, I want to turn it over to you. Dan Fletcher, who is the CFO of Host Analytics.
Thanks very much. And, I'll echo the thoughts here. Thanks to the folks who turned out. So I'm a Chicago, and this isn't much to me and probably not much to the folks who came, but it's still inclement weather. So very much appreciate you coming out. So as I was socializing here before we kicked this thing off, I was impressed, being now on the West Coast and working in tech. The majority of the events I attend, it's all someone who works for a VC-backed company, usually tech-enabled or tech-adjacent. And as I was speaking to folks in the crowd here, I was just impressed with the diversity. So I met David, who's CFO of the Greater Boston Food Bank, which is really cool to have nonprofits in attendance, and Ken, who runs a CFO of a real estate investment and development company. So just juxtapose those two. And then we've got Matt Paul, who's CFO of 1251 Capital, and that's an investment company, and several others as well. Alexis, controller of Snapfly, which is a tech company. So I felt at home with her. But again, thanks for coming out. And I would encourage you to speak to each other. I mean, that kind of diversity amongst finance professionals is a really great thing for both your network and just generally your knowledge base, right? I mean, it's cool picking the brain of a nonprofit CFO. It's a very different lift than a real estate development company. So I want to get to Tim as quickly as I can, but I have been asked to introduce myself to kind of explain who and what I am and what I'm doing here. So first and foremost, I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, which I will not apologize for. And I did want to thank the Red Sox for Anthony Rizzo and John Lester, who did not come directly from the Red Sox, but were former Red Sox players and were critical in bringing a world championship to the Cubs in 2016, which was singularly one of the best months of my life. So very much appreciated to Red Sox and all the fans. So look, I'm kind of a unique guy to be hosting this event in the sense that I'm a non-traditional CFO, which is interesting because I would say Tim in many ways followed a non-traditional path as well. So I'm a consultant turned investor turned operator. I started my career in 2007, late 2007, right in the teeth of the global financial crisis, which was a really interesting time to be working with my clients who were all big financial institutions like Citadel and Nuveen Funds, State Farm Bank, and Goldman Sachs. And I learned a ton watching, coming straight out of the fraternity and the fun times of school into the teeth of this recession and watching watching how that impacted the people around me and the organizations that they worked in. So it taught me a lot. And I moved from PwC into the world of investment, first with Allstate Investments, the asset manager for the Global 100 insurance company, and later with a middle market private equity company called Sterling Partners that invested in for-profit education, healthcare, and business services. As part of that role, I worked with a lot of folks like you out in our portfolio. And I had sat in the ivory tower running the Excel models and the cap tables and the waterfalls and running diligence, and it really opened my eyes. Reminded me of my PwC days, but in a significantly better economy at that time, around 2012. And it really brought me to life. My passion is working with financial professionals like yourselves and operational folks as well, although not really marketing. No offense to I'm just kidding, Mackenzie. And so I made my way back to the ops side and did 4.5 years with Alvarez & Marsal's outsourced operating partner group, working for big private equity firms like Kohlberg and Blackstone and Advent, and then finally just jumping all the way back into a fund with Vector Capital, which is why I'm here today, because a year ago, Vector Capital was lucky enough to be able to acquire Host Analytics, which you'll hear a bit about, I think, from Tim later today. And if you would like to learn more about it, you can just find me after the event. And I, as a finance professional, really believe in this technology. This is not a sales event, so I'm going to stop there. But Host Analytics, again, lucky enough to partner with the Red Sox as one of our customers, and CFO Leadership Council as one of the thought leaders out there that we really look to as the industry brings itself into really the future, right? 2020 and beyond. So that's enough about me and enough from me. I do want to turn it over now to our esteemed guest, and I've been asked to intro him, although he really needs no intro. Tim is a super impressive guy, as I think most of you know. He's very Googleable, and I took the liberty of using Google to tell you a little bit about my key takeaways on Tim. So Tim's been with the club, I think, for 17 years, joined in 2003, and had some really unique experience before that. Tim started as a consultant, similar to myself, for Bain & Company, and then took a real pivot that I think speaks to the way he approaches problem solving and team building. He was a middle school math teacher for 4 years here in the Boston school system. And so you ask, well, how does he end up as a CFO? I'll let him tell that story. I think it's one of the most interesting things about his role with the Red Sox is how he got that role. But a couple of his highlights is he's responsible for really bringing the Red Sox into the modern financial community as a business. They're a middle market business, and you can't, in this economy and in the year 2019, thrive as a middle market business without being on the cutting edge of analytics and insights and technology and team building. And Tim simply offered that to the club. A number of accomplishments that he's executed along the way are building a really world-class team, implementing world-class systems, and leading diligence for, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Liverpool Football Club or a guy named LeBron James. So Tim was instrumental in getting those deals done, at least on the diligence side, for the Fenway Management Group. So without further ado here, I'd like to just have Tim come up. We're looking forward to your presentation, Tim.
Thank you. Before we dive in, I just want to say a few thank yous myself. First of all, thanks again for everybody for braving the weather and coming out and joining us. Really excited for those of you that were able to come. We've got some food and drinks. We've got the World Series trophies in the back. If you haven't seen those yet, you can take some pictures there. I've been lucky enough with the 17 years to have 4 World Series rings myself, and so I brought those 2, and you can try those on if you want later. So that's over to the side. Also want to just thank Dan and Host Analytics for hosting this great event, and for the CFO Leadership Council for also their efforts in partnering as well. So I think what I'll do, I'll tell that quick story just because you referenced it in terms of how I got my job. It was this has been an incredible journey. I feel like I've been so fortunate to have the job that I have and have the opportunity to work with the great people at the Red Sox and just enjoy 17 or 18 incredible years. I started with the Red Sox as an unpaid intern. I was teaching, as Dan mentioned, in the 8th grade math teacher in the Boston Public School System, and I sent a blind email to Larry Lucchino, then president and CEO of the Red Sox. I guessed at his email address. I guessed it was lluchino@redsox.com. Turns out I was right. And I sent him a note and I asked him if he would entertain me working there for the summer as an unpaid intern. And lo and behold, Larry Lucchino wrote back to me and invited me to come in, and I interviewed, and long story short, I started as an unpaid intern in the summer of 2003, had an incredible summer. I'll touch on some of the stuff I did back then. Was able to start with the Red Sox full-time in 2004. In about June, that was a good time to be starting. For those of you that are Red Sox fans, a couple months later, we won. We broke an 86-year curse and won the World Series. So it's been an incredible ride, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think what I hope to do over the next 30 or 35 minutes or so is really take you all on a journey through the evolution of what we've done on the business side with the use of data and analytics and technology. And as Dan said, that's really been something that I've been very passionate about throughout my career. And I'll sort of start by just with the first slide here, and thinking about the past 17 years, I think of in sort of 3 different phases. So what you see on the slide here is the little people icons are people in our business analytics department. So for the first, almost 10 years, it was just me. I was sort of behind a computer, working mostly in Excel, doing what I call phase 1 things, which were things like ticket pricing, database management, some improved efficiencies, some one-off analysis, and it was kind of ad hoc. It was sort of not very well organized. It was at the time when I arrived, the Red Sox weren't doing a lot in this area at all, so there was a lot of low-hanging fruit, and there were opportunities to do more. And that was kind of the phase 1, and I'm going to give some examples of things that we did in that time frame. Then we entered phase 2, where we started this journey. I got to hire someone. Actually, that person is here, Kurt. Raise your hand. So Kurt is that second little guy in 2012 that joined. And we started a journey thinking about customer data. So we started to realize that there's probably nothing more valuable to us than the data of our customers, and understanding that data and using that data to more effectively market to our customers. So we started a journey with CRM and our customer data warehouse and marketing and sales analytics, et cetera. Actually, it's funny. I think almost everyone on this chart is, I'm going to point out. So the third icon is Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie waves, sorry. I invited my staff to join me, and they all came. So she joined in 2004. Excuse me? Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to get to that. So 2014, Anne-Marie joined. 2015, John Hay joined. John's right there. And then 2017, Patrick joined. So I didn't realize this, but all the people on this slide are here at that table. And then in phase 3, we started a journey of doing more predictive modeling. We started doing more, trying to predict what's going to happen, trying to run models and all sorts of things that I'll get into in more details. We did some customer segmentation stuff. We're doing some real-time data integration, and also using business intelligence tools to display that data. So that just sets the stage for what I'll get into in more detail in each of those phases. I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples in each of those phases as I take you through the journey. Again, trying to rewind the clock back to 2003, where we started, and to where we are today in 2019, and really where we're going in 2020 and beyond. So in the phase 1 side of things, the first thing, and this slide needs a little setup, and I'll actually start here. So if you think about ticket pricing in sports, there's different types of categories of pricing, and one concept is called variable pricing. And so variable pricing basically means different games are different prices. Opening day is a higher demand game. That game should be a higher price game. A summer Saturday game against the Yankees, higher demand game. That should be a higher priced ticket. A Tuesday in April against maybe the Rays would be a lower price ticket. So what you see on this chart, the x-axis splits up the league into everything. Teams on the left side of it did not have variable pricing. So what that means is all of their pricing was static, every game, same price. And then the right side of this chart are teams that had some form of variable pricing, whether they had 3 tiers or 5 tiers, and you can kind of see the league split. The y-axis is splitting teams up into what we call dynamic pricing. So what that means is the price could be set, and then it changes over time. If it's a rainy day, the price might come down. If it's a great matchup of pitchers, the price might go up. But the prices are adjusted in real time. And that's really how a lot of pricing works. For example, airline pricing, things like that are dynamic. The point of this slide is the entire league. This is what the league looked like in 2011. So you had 12 teams in that upper right-hand corner, which were doing both variable and dynamic pricing, which in theory it should be the more efficient pricing, right? You're sort of trying to match supply and demand. You had 10 teams in the lower right-hand corner, which had variable but not dynamic. You had 4 teams in the upper left, and then you had 4 teams, including ourselves, in what I kind of call the Stone Ages, which is sort of all the prices are the same, you never change them, it just is what it is. I'm going to flip through the evolution of how this has changed in Major League Baseball over the last several years and just watch how these logos move on the slide. This is 2011, this is 2012, this is 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8. Oh, sorry, I think it only goes back to 17. But the point is, everybody has been moving to that upper right-hand corner because that's the logical place to be, right? So that's the place where you can best align your supply and your demand because you can match your prices to their demand, and you can also change it over time. One thing of note, we were actually the last team to do this. In 2013, we were the only team left in that lower left-hand corner, and we've caught up, I think, to the league in our pricing strategies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because that's really been a really valuable use of analytics where we've dived into the data. We've looked at what people are willing to pay on the secondary market, and we've tried to match our primary market prices to those. And if you look a little further in that, sorry, I'll keep. If you go back again to 2013, you can look at a Fenway Park seating chart. And if you were sitting in the last row of Section 87, how many people are familiar with Fenway or have been to a game at Fenway? Okay. Not a great seat in that, right? Last row of Section 87, $55 back in 2013. The first row of Section 8, much, much better seat, $55, exact, because it just happens to be those are both considered right field box seats. And furthermore, you have somebody in field box 9, which happens to be a different color on the charts, it's a different price scale, and they could be sitting next to that person and hold hands the whole game, but just because they're separated by a rail, he's paying $135. That doesn't seem to make sense, but that's what our pricing was like, and that's what we were charging back then. What we did is we went and got the data, we analyzed it, my team obviously did a lot of the work, and we create things like heat maps. So we create things that allow us to see, well, what is the actual demand for those sections? So what you see on the right side of this chart is a heat map that shows the actual demand of those sections relative to their face value price. So a dark green section is a section that is underpriced relative to its demand. It sells for much more than its face value. Those are the areas that you should target if you want to think about raising prices more because there's more demand in those areas. The yellow sections are appropriately priced. They're sort of aligned at their appropriate price. The red sections, in many cases, some of our premium levels, actually you could argue might be a little bit overpriced because their demand is lower. But we like to think about visuals like this because it very quickly allows our executives and decision makers to take the information, put it in a format where you can very clearly see where there's opportunities for changes. So we've done a lot with analyzing our sections, adjusting our prices based on their demand, and using those charts to identify the areas where we can change prices year to year. So that's just one example of using that visual and using that analysis. The same theory applies to the calendar. So if you go back to 2013, before we had variable pricing, the left image just basically says that every game was $55 for a grandstand. Opening day, $55. That second game against Baltimore on April 10th on a Wednesday, $55. Again, those summer Yankee games, everything was $55. If you look at demand, it actually looks like this. Opening day sells for $112 on the secondary market. These July Yankee games, which are in the green, in the $148, $140. Those April Tuesdays, $30. We were charging the same price for opening day, which has a market value of $112, and that second game, which has a $30, and it was clearly very much misaligned. So our pricing was very much misaligned with this demand. We started this journey of variable pricing where this slide first, what we did is we took all the data, we took like 7 or 8 years of data. We were very fortunate because of our league partnership with StubHub. We had access to every single transaction that anybody purchased a ticket on StubHub, when they bought it, what they paid, for what seat, for what game. That data for someone like me who loves data is like gold. It is literally the most valuable data you can imagine because it's what your fans are willing to pay for every single game, for every single section. It allows you to create those heat maps, allows you to create things like this. We asked ourselves, well, what's more valuable? Saturdays in July? We knew that Saturdays in July were valuable because just, that makes sense, right? Kids are out of school, the weather's nicer, it's on a Saturday. Turns out Saturdays in July, if you look at that combination on this chart, I don't know if I have a laser pointer, but anyway, that 2x, those games were selling for twice their face value, and that was the most valuable. Pretty intuitive. Then you can see how a Sunday in July or a Sunday in June might compare. Those were some of the easier things, but we weren't sure what's more valuable, a Saturday in April or a Tuesday in July. Turns out they're actually basically the same. If you look at a Saturday in April, this represents the multiple of face value. So what the market price was relative to what we were charging. So those Saturdays in April, that 1.35x in the sort of top row under the Saturday, that means that on average those tickets were selling for 35% higher than their face value. Turns out Tuesday in July, 1.3x, basically the same. We didn't realize that they were. So anyway, this allowed us to create the tiering structure that we have now using the data to start this pricing structure where we created price tiers. So this chart shows the secondary market price based on the categories of games that we put into these 5 buckets. So a tier 1 game, think about Yankee games, think about opening day, think about those Saturdays in July. Maybe the Dodgers are in town or the Cubs are in town. Those are going to be your tier 1 games. Tier 2, maybe it's a Saturday in June or maybe it's a Saturday in May, et cetera, et cetera. The tier 5 games, Tuesday, Wednesdays in April, Tuesday, Wednesdays in September. And these numbers are what the secondary market prices were. This is demand. And this is what we were charging in 2013, same price. So we were charging $55 for a grandstand seat, and the market was telling us they were willing to pay $120. And all that, the blue bar above that yellow dot, was profit captured by ticket brokers. And conversely, for those tier 5 games, we were charging $55, and we were getting undercut, on the secondary market. We were having a hard time competing with those because those tickets were being offered for far less. So we started this journey where those red dot lines are the 2013 face values. And then you can see what we did in 14. We introduced variable pricing. So we aligned our prices a little better. 15, 16, 17, and 18. So now we're not aligned perfectly. We actually believe we should be a little below the market price. We want to leave a little bit of room on there. But we're much better aligned. So now we're charging, 25, 26 maybe dollars for a tier 5 game, and we're under that secondary price. So this has been an evolution over time. We haven't been able to do this immediately over 1 year, but over the last 6 or 7 years, we've been evolving our pricing strategy. So that's sort of one part of phase 1. The other part of phase 1 was just a lot of what I call one-off analyses. So again, we like heat maps. We like to do things graphically. This chart on the left is a heat map showing the number of injuries due to batted balls during a season. So there was a lot of conversation around the nets, the netting at Fenway Park. It used to just be behind home plate. You can see the kind of gray protected area behind home plate. That was really all that used to be protected. Then there were some high-profile injuries. Major League Baseball, I think, made a good decision to mandate that clubs expand that protective netting to go to the dugouts, and then they mandated to go even further. We now have protective netting from basically foul pole to foul pole almost. And this map was allowing us to understand, well, where are these injuries taking the most place? Because anytime someone has an injury and requires medical attention, we log it in our database. And this is the data. This is a graphical. Now, we looked at this at first, and we said, this is weird, and then it made sense. Down the left field line, kind of far from home plate, that's where right-handed hitters are hitting these line drives. And the people down there think they're safe because they're kind of far from home plate. Turns out the most incidents were happening down that left field corner. And that was sort of interesting for us to understand that seems like it's far away, but people are still getting injured there. We got to make sure that net extends all the way. So this was just another visual representation of a one-off analysis. Another thing we were asked to do is look at start times. So there's 3 different columns in these tables. It's all Saturday start times over the course of multiple years, and it's key metrics that we track. So we had a sample of 17 1 o'clock games, 10 4 p.m. games, and 26 7 p.m. games. And the question was, is it clear that any of those start times are better from a business perspective? Or do you sell more revenue? Do you have higher per caps? The red numbers are the lowest number of the group comparisons, and then the green is the highest. But pretty clearly, the 1 p.m. games, the numbers aren't dramatically different. You can see you have a 36,600 average attendance versus 37.4. You've got a slightly higher no-show rate, which is the percentage of tickets that don't get scanned. But in general, it's pretty clear that 1 o'clock games in these comparisons were, on average, about $100,000 less in revenue for the club. The 4 o'clock and 7 p.m., if you look at the very bottom, that comparison to 1 p.m. numbers, the 4 p.m. games were about 88,000 better on average for revenue. But again, just trying to think through using data to understand decisions that we could control. Because for the most part, we control start times. If we get picked by Fox or a nationally broadcast, that sort of doesn't. But start times are within our control, and so these are things that we can decide. And that's just another example of using data to help guide the decision. Jumping into phase 2. So phase 2 was, again, all about customer data, customer marketing. And when we got started on this journey, actually, before I do that, We really, we used to use this analogy that we just had no strategy to our targeting of our marketing. We had 1 million people in our email database. If we were selling them, any product, we just click send to everybody. And this was years and years ago, right? We just send everybody everything. In this day and age, you just can't do that. People will opt out quickly. If they're not getting a message that's relevant to them, they're opting out. And once they opt out, you can't really get them back. So we treat our email database, again, talking about data, we treat it like gold. We want to make sure that those people are getting the right message served to them at the right time that's relevant to them. So in order to do that, we had to understand more about our customers. So we started this journey. This slide, the way I set this up is, I am an enormous fan of ketchup. I put ketchup on a lot of, like almost everything I eat, and I'm incredibly loyal to Heinz. So if I will buy, if I'm in a restaurant and I have Heinz, I'll begrudgingly eat a different type of ketchup. But for the most part, I'll only buy Heinz. So I am an incredibly loyal Heinz customer. But there's only so many ways that I can engage with Heinz, right? I buy the product, which I do a lot. In theory, I could go to their website, or I could opt into their email, or I could like them on Facebook, or follow them on Twitter, or I could give them a call. I don't do any of those things. And furthermore, I buy Heinz at the supermarket, so Heinz doesn't even know me at all, right? To me, they have no idea that I'm this incredibly loyal Heinz customer. They don't have me in their database, probably, right? I don't think, And so Heinz really can't do a lot with because they're not selling directly in most cases. They don't have the opportunity that we have when you think about what Red Sox fans are doing. Okay, so Red Sox fans are doing, and this is just a small subset of things. They can buy season tickets. They can buy tickets on RedSox.com. They can buy on StubHub. They can buy concessions and merchandise. They can support our sponsors. They can donate to our foundation, join our fan clubs. They can book events like this one. The stuff that doesn't require money, they can watch on TV, listen on the radio, visit our website, opt into emails, like us on Facebook, Twitter, take a survey, read articles online. They can come to a game. They can take a tour. There's all these different things. And most of those things, they're doing directly with us. Right? There's an interaction that they have with us. And if you go back to 2013 when we started this journey, all of these interactions were not organized in any way. They were in different silos. There was no sort of thought process around creating sort of the Holy Grail, which is a 360-degree view of an individual customer. That Joe Smith does 8 of these things. We know how many times they did it. We have the history of when he bought from us. We have the history of what he did. We're understanding more about his preferences. He likes to go to Saturday games only. He should get messaging and targets on Saturday games. He has a family or he doesn't. We've done a lot with purchasing Axiom data, which is demographic data that we layer on top of our database. But we basically have started this journey where we sort of think about it in these kind of phases. So you have these journey touch points that I alluded to. They're interacting. They're buying something or they're doing something. And you have a technology that's capturing that data in some way. There's a lot of different systems that capture that data, whether it's tickets.com or StubHub or MLB.com or Twitter or Facebook or our point of sale. And those things have to be connected, and then they have to be organized in a data warehouse. So that next phase is to put all that data in a customer warehouse. There's a deduping process. There's a cleansing process. It takes a lot of time. My team over here has done all the hard work. I get to take the credit, but John Hay, all these guys have done all this work. But once you complete that process, once you make those connections, once you organize the data in a way that you can then tell a story, it allows you to have a screen in front of our salespeople that has a customer profile that says that Matt Martin, here's where he lives, here's what he spent on tickets last year, here's how many games he went to last year. Here are the things he likes on Facebook because he likes us, and we can, that's information we can get. And here's what he spent on. And this is an incredible amount of information that allows you to, if you're interacting with him, whether it's on the phone or via email, to send him again much more relevant messages. So sort of that journey of connecting those data sources, organizing the data, is what we've done, and it's really been a pretty effective journey that has allowed us to be much more targeted in our sales efforts. And this just speaks a little bit more about that in terms of all the different data sources that we've connected, some data sources that we want to connect, and then the end result. We can now, for example, when we were marketing our family 4-packs, which is a package that we were marketing at the end of the season, which was 4 tickets, 4 hot dogs, 4 French fries, 4 sodas, and it's targeted to a family of 4. Sort of, and I think there was some kid components too. We can look at our database and start filtering. Okay, we want to target people that we believe have kids, because there's a way to, we have data that suggests we know they have kids. And we want to target people that have a certain household income, because this is sort of it's a value package program. So anyway, that allows us to send a highly targeted message to that group that we believe will result in higher open rates, higher click rates, and ultimately higher sale rates. So that's part of that journey. The other thing we've done is on the marketing side is we've thought about our marketing efforts in what I consider the spectrum of measurability. So on the left side of that, you think about things that are very difficult to measure. So things like out of home. If you put up a billboard, I know these days there's actually technology to be able to target and track due to location. But if it's just a standard billboard, think about just a regular billboard, very hard to put an ROI to that investment. Right? How do you know if it's effective? How do you know if that investment is paying off? Very difficult. Television, also hard. If you run a 30-second TV commercial, unless there's a call to action, like put this discount code in when you buy, it's difficult to measure the effectiveness of TV. Print, similarly difficult. You do an ad in the newspaper, a full-page ad in the Globe. We still do that stuff, but it's hard to measure. So those are the things that are harder. Then you start to get into things like promotional giveaways. Bobbleheads. You can measure the effectiveness of those things. You can compare games that have, when I have a slide on this, those giveaways to those that don't, and you can try to measure, you know what you're spending on those bobbleheads. What is the result? What's the ROI? Digital advertising, of course, very measurable, right? These days, you can measure everything. The click all the way through to the sale, and you can get metrics like, hey, it's a 13-to-1 ROI, or it's a 10-to-1 ROI. Search engine marketing, same thing. And actually, an example of one of our easiest measuring thing was a direct mail campaign piece. It was just a postcard that we sent. Because we knew who we sent it to, we were able to tie it back when they called us to buy season tickets, and there's a slide on that as well. So when you think about these different categories, this slide shows how our marketing spend has evolved over time. So if you go back to 2012, the blue bar is those difficult to measure categories: print, TV, out of home. We were spending 76% of our advertising on those categories, and we were spending only 24% on the search engine marketing, digital, what I call measurable. And you can see that that's evolved to almost flipped. So now we're 70-30. We haven't abandoned TV at all. We haven't abandoned out-of-home TV and print. We still believe that there's value to just your brand, just sort of, it doesn't have to be a call to action. But we've completely flipped that evolution of the allocation of that spend because we love to be able to spend money and then ask ourselves, did it work? How well did it work? And try to compare it to other initiatives. So this has been a journey that we've been on the marketing side to be able to measure the effectiveness of our spend. These are just a couple of examples that I alluded to. So this is a chart that shows the number of fans in the building over time. So the left side of this chart is 90 minutes before first pitch. That dotted line is first pitch, and then it takes you through the game. The red line is a game without a bobblehead giveaway, so just a kind of a normal game. 90 minutes before first pitch, there's not a lot of people there. 400 people are lined up. On a bobblehead, there's 3,000 because we're only giving away 7,500 bobbleheads. All these people, if they want the bobblehead, they're there 90 minutes before. And guess what those people do for 90 minutes while they're waiting for the game to start? They're buying beers, they're buying hot dogs, they're buying other things. It turns out that those two games end up at roughly the same turnstile at the end of the day. The same number of people end up, but they just come earlier. But we can measure what does that mean to us? And so if we're spending $3 per bobblehead and we're giving away 7,500 bobbleheads, we know what we're spending. We can then quantify that not only to the time of arrival, but also did we sell more tickets? Did people buy tickets because of the bobblehead? And we believe that we are motivating behavior. You can compare. Blue games are all games of similar quality. So they're either a Monday or a Tuesday. They're a non-premium opponent. They're in April or May without a bobblehead. And you can see it varies a little bit, but for the most part, that average is about 31,000 tickets or so. And the game where we had a giveaway, was 3,000 or 4,000 more tickets. So of course, that's really valuable. You can ask yourself, yes, we started this journey on these promotional giveaways. The first year we did, I think, was 2013. We did 3 of them. We now do 14 or 15 of them, and we believe that they're working. On the season ticket mailer, that was another example. We were sitting around a room brainstorming, and somebody said, I think we should send people a postcard. And at first we were like, what do you mean mail? Come on, this is 2017. I said, no, people don't open their email anymore, but they like getting mail. So let's try it. So we had this customer data warehouse. We were able to filter to basically find about 75,000, a mix of businesses and individuals. And they were, within 25-mile radius of Fenway, and they had a household income of over $100,000, and they had purchased at least 5 games the prior season. And they weren't currently season ticket holders. And we sent them a postcard that just literally said, interested in season tickets, visit redsox.com/season tickets. That was it. And we had sent that mailer, and leading up to the point when the mailers arrived, we were averaging about 8 online inquiries, people that filled in the form and said, please contact me. That jumped up to 30. That's a pretty significant jump. But more importantly, we sent the mailers on November 17th. The entire mailing campaign cost us $25,000 to send those 75,000 postcards. Within a week, we had sold $100,000 of new season tickets that we could tie directly back to this promotion because we knew the people. And then by the end of the 3 months, we had sold $600,000 of new season ticket revenue as a result of that $25,000 campaign. And that $600,000 tends to renew at about 90% every year. So it's almost like this ongoing, recurring. So it was one of the most effective marketing things we'd ever done. Now, the $25,000 is the cost of the mailer itself. Obviously, without the data warehouse itself and the investment in that strategy, you wouldn't have been able to do that. But the point is that was a really highly effective thing that we did that resulted in really great results. And we've done that every year since. Switching to phase 3. And now you get into, again, some of the predictive stuff, the business intelligence stuff. And so one thing that we did is, and it's funny, I keep putting these slides up and I have to turn to my table here because really these guys are the guys that are doing a lot of this work, so I'll keep saying that. But a season ticket renewal campaign. So we started thinking about, well, it would be helpful to know what each individual season ticket holder's likelihood to renew is, right? Are they... And we had all these different variables that we could track. What type of account? How far do they live from the park? I'm not going to read them all. Where's their seat located? How long have they been a season ticket holder? How many games did they go to last year? How many times were their tickets scanned? What's their household income, et cetera, et cetera? All of these variables feed into this model that spits out a intent to renew. And then we know every single account going into the off season, we can predict what we think their intent to renew is. And if it's 98%, it doesn't mean that we ignore them, but we're not that worried about them. Typically, if our model says they're going to renew 98%, they're pretty much likely to renew. And conversely, if it's 50%, we're not going to spend a ton of time on them because they might be harder to convince because they're kind of, you might think that, they're probably not likely. But that sort of 80 to 90% range, the fence sitters, those are the people in the off season we try to target. We try to focus as much of our renewal efforts on that group because we know that they are potentially more likely motivated by reaching out, checking in on them, maybe inviting them to an off-season event. So so this has allowed us to sort of, again, we care about all our season ticket holders and we want them all to renew. It's not to say we ignore the 50% of the 99s, but it allows us, again, to prioritize those that we think might be swayed by different initiatives on the renewal side. And this also fed into, so in our CRM system, when you pull up someone's account, it has their intent to renew right there as a metric. And one other thing we did in this chart, and we explain this chart in the upper left-hand corner here, we had bonuses for our account executives, who their job is to keep season ticket holders happy. Their bonus plans were tied to a renewal rate, but prior to this journey, everybody just was tied to the overall 90% expectation. But some people we realized had their clients just happened to have a higher predicted intent to renew, and others had lower. So it was a little bit unfair. The blue bar with the 90 is meant to show that everybody was tied to 90%. Didn't matter what their mix was. What turned out that AE1, who might have a certain mix of clients, had a renewal rate projected at 97%. And AE6 had an 82% projection. We changed their goals to align better to what we expected the renewal to be to make it more fair. So, and that was a change that we made to that process. On the group sales side, this chart just is a similar chart that just shows the predicted intent to renew based on different buckets and what it actually was. So the red line is a predicted rate, and the blue chart is actual. Fan clustering, customer segmentation. I'm going to give Patrick Kelly a shout out here because he really led this effort. So we really started this journey really last year, maybe the year before, kind of last year. So we said, we really need to better understand our fans. But not only that, we want to try to put them into sort of segments, right? Clustering, sort of thinking about them, because you can't think about individuals. You have to group them in some way. So we said, all right, why don't we do this? We started with a database of all ticket buyers since 2015. So it was about 800,000 email addresses. We then we filtered that down to only those that we had Axiom data for. So Axiom data is a company you can go out and purchase demographic data that tells you if they're married or if they have kids and what their household income is and things like that. So we now had 300,000 people. And we focused on these 9 variables at the left to try to cluster. So we looked at age, the gender, whether they live within 25 miles of Fenway or not, household income, if they had kids or not, or number of kids in their household, if they were married or not, if they were an existing season ticket holder or not, how much they spent on tickets on average, and how many tickets they buy on average. This column right here is the entire group. So the 300,000 names, average age of 46, 62% male, 27% live within 25-mile radius of Fenway, 108,000 household income, 1 child on average, 70% married, 3% of season ticket holders, $55 on average tickets, and 8 tickets per year. And then we allowed the computer and Patrick to help to basically tell us what were some interesting segments, what characteristics grew together. So we created, and I'm not going to go into all of these, but I'll try to highlight some of these. So I'll start with Nesson Nelson. Nesson Nelson was named that because he or she, but doesn't really attend many games. He only buys tickets once. He watches on TV. He's still a fan. He's in our database. He's someone we want to cultivate. But he lives outside of Fenway. None of them live within 25 miles of Fenway. So that's one of the characteristics that drove that segment. But because of that, it's a segment that might not respond well to ticket offers. They might be a fan, but they're really more of a fan watching on TV and following from afar. Millennial Mel, younger, right? So that average age is 32. So compared to the 46 on average, generally lower household income, under indexes on kids and marriage. So that's a different group that might respond better to some sort of offer for social, younger type things. One night stand, that was a fun one. One night stand typically comes to 1 game a year, buys 1 ticket, but when he comes, he spends $114. So you see that 114, that green box in the lower? He's willing to spend for a premium experience. So that's a group that might respond to an offer for Green Monster tickets or a premium package. So that segment is going to be marketed something different because he's willing to spend more. Still doesn't come often, but when he comes, he's willing to spend. Boston Bargain Bob, conversely, spends less. Spends only $47 on average. Typically looks to spend a little less. Buys 1.3 tickets a year, et cetera. So might respond to a discount offer. Clark Griswold, family. So that one over-indexes on marriage. 83% married, 2.8 kids, compared to 1. You can see those green boxes that jump out. Someone that's going to respond to a family offer. Richie Rich, very high household income. $246,000 on the household income line, well over indexes there. Again, someone else that might respond to different offerings because of the household income. Leadless Leslie, you look down on the bottom, buys 18 tickets a year, but for the most part isn't really a season ticket holder. So we think that might be future season ticket holders, right? They're buying a lot of tickets, but they're not really. So those are the names that we provide our sales academy in order to sell season tickets. And then season ticket holder, Superfan Sal, is really our season ticket holders. They're buying 270 tickets on average, 86% of them are season. But this allowed us to, again, going back to the marketing, send the different groups different messages. And then this is just, we created these fun images, and we had fun with the naming, and we had fun with kind of the segments. That just demonstrates those names and pictures. Business intelligence. This is, again, going back to just real-time data integration. Some of those maps I showed you earlier, I actually made them by hand in Photoshop. I was like clicking the colors and painting it green and painting it red. This is, now we have software, we use Tableau, that allows us to draw these stadium maps in real time, and they update in real time. So we can filter it by game, by opponent, by start time, by, it allows you to just see how it changes, and you can see this color, really in real time. And it's available on your mobile device so that anybody can pull it up. This is a map that shows the tickets distributed percentage so you can see in the right field corner, we don't sell as many tickets. Green is obviously pretty much sold through at 95 to 100%. You can see other pockets where we might not sell. Again, we like to do maps. We like to show things with colors. And this next section I want to talk about is not so much data analytics, but it's the use of technology in the finance department. And again, coming from where we were, it wasn't that long ago in 2010, 2011, where we were really not using, we were pretty much way behind our peers in the way that in our processes in our accounting department. So there's 3 or 4 examples that I want to highlight here. The way that we approved invoices, now this was in 2000, up through 2009, not that long ago. The way it works is our accounting department had a paper invoice. They put it in an interoffice envelope. They sent it to our mailroom. The mailroom guys sent it to the person. The person wrote their name on it, wrote the budget code on it, put it back in the envelope, went back to the mailroom, went back to the accounting department. That was literally how every single invoice was approved back, again, 2010, not that long ago. We developed our own system. We have software developers that developed an invoicing system that now allows us to, PDF invoices are emailed. It takes the metadata from those, it loads it up into the system, and we can, the approvers get emails that say they have invoices that are ready, they approve them, they code them, they put comments in. It's much more effective. You can run reports on how many things are past due, et cetera. That's been a great evolution and really helpful for our accounting department. Budgeting, and I'm going to, obviously I'm going to get to Host being a huge part of this. Before 2011, before we partnered with Host, it was Excel. And we would have these Excel sheets with 27 tabs and links to formulas from one document to the other, and it was ripe for human error. And we had to double check all the formulas, and it literally looked like this, where people were writing comments in terms of, okay, I'm going to buy 10 computers at $2,000, and then they had to spread it across the 12 months. And there were errors made all the time. And this isn't that long ago. Host has been an incredible partner of ours. We partnered with them when we started this journey. Now we're allowed to, all the budget managers log into Host. They can enter all of their comments. They can enter their spreads. We can run forecasting. We can do all sorts of reporting that we were never able to do. Host has actually helped us in terms of some customization that we've asked for. So it's just been an incredible benefit to our accounting team as we're doing our financial planning and budgeting, compared to where we were before. We made that transition in 2011. This one is crazy to me. When our ushers and ticket takers would sign in, this was back in 2010 also, they used to sign in on a piece of paper. We had their name on a piece of paper. They would sign their name. They'd look at their watch. They'd write down 11:30. And then we had to have someone take all that data from that piece of paper, enter it into our payroll system. It was incredibly inefficient, but that was just the way it was. It was a piece of paper. We partnered with ABI. We obviously now when an usher walks in, he walks into Fenway Park. Fenway Park knows where he is. It allows him to check in on his phone. He's signed in, and we can also run reports on all that. But it makes that process so much more smooth and efficient. And I have 2 more, I think. Expense reports, same thing. We were Excel. It was an Excel with drop-down lists, and people would pull down the list, and then you'd have to summarize these expense reports, and someone in the accounting department would have to pull up the summaries and enter them in. Crazy. Now we have Concur. Concur allows you to take a picture of your receipt with your phone, upload it right away, code it, et cetera. It's been a great transition. And the last one is ticket reports. We would have our ticket manager pull reports out of our system, put them in a spreadsheet, put them in an email, and then send an email out to our management team daily. That process took her 45 minutes to an hour every day. Now we just have Tableau. Open up your phone, pull it up. There's your report. It's right there. It refreshes every 15 minutes. All the relevant data that we think people want to see is put in their pockets in a graphical way. So the final phase of this, and I don't know what I'm doing on time, but this is just what's next. Some of the stuff we're doing next. Some of the stuff we're excited about. One thing we're excited about is MLB has their own data warehouse. So things that fans are doing, buying, online and streaming. There's 50 million plus sort of interactions. We're now integrating with them. So we're now going to merge that in with our customer data warehouse, and that you're excited about that. They're doing the same thing with dashboarding and reporting. It's just going to make our data warehouse that much more effective and valuable. That's one thing we're excited about. The next thing is we're early on in this journey, but customer lifetime value, right? What is the value of acquiring a new fan? This chart on the left just shows, this is one study we did where we looked at 300,000 single game ticket purchasers, and we looked at how many tickets they bought in year 2, in year 3, in year 4, and year 5. So of the 300,000 that made a ticket in year 1, only 50,000 bought in year 2, but still 50,000 bought again. And then the light blue bar is their second purchase. The orange bar is multiple purchase. But the right bar shows that if they spend $140 that first year, on average they spend $47 the next year, $43 the next year. So even in this 5-year period, that individual fan is spending $300, and we can start to figure out, well, what is that true lifetime value? We're early on in that process, but we want to get to a place where we can assign a customer lifetime value. I won't get into all the details here, but we are migrating to the cloud. So we're working with Google Cloud. What we're doing now these days is we just have too much data in our on-prem servers, which are great. We partner with EMC, and they're a great partner of ours. But we're not able currently to manage what we want to do with the data we want to put in. So we're now migrating to the cloud. We're doing a lot with Google Cloud. That's going to improve our efficiency, increase our scale, optimize our spending, et cetera. It's going to help us a lot. And then the final thing in the sort of what's next is we're doing things with machine learning and AI. So things that humans were doing in the past, running models or running reports, we're training computers to do, so the computer can then run it, again, making it more efficient for us to open up the humans to sort of make even more important analyses. So I think I went a little bit quick through those last one. Oh, this is my last slide. Sort of the final thing here is just a reminder that while we're excited and proud about what we've done, data has to be one component of a strategy. And so sometimes we'll use data to make a recommendation, or we'll have a conversation with my boss, Sam Kennedy, and others. And the data might say one thing and we'll do something else, because it should be a guide, it should help you, but it shouldn't just be the only thing that you rely on. So we always try to balance all the stuff we're doing on this side with executive instincts and just other things that are factors. And so just sort of the point of this little cartoon is just, it's not this magic unicorn that can solve all your problems. It's something that we believe passionately has helped us over the last several years. But again, it should be balanced in the appropriate way. So that takes me to the end. I don't know how I did on time, but hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and I'm happy to answer questions. I know Dan, I think, is going to join me. So.
Excellent.
Oh, sorry.
An impressive
Sorry, just about the questions. I did bring a couple small gifts. So if you ask a question, I like to blackmail the audience so we can try to get questions. So I should have said at the outset, if you ask a question, you get to come up and pick a prize from up here. There's some certificates for free tickets to next year. There's some bobbleheads. There's some autographed photos, although the players you might not be that impressed with. I think Johnny Gomes and Mike Timlin. And, but anyway, there's some small prizes. So if you ask a question, you get to come up and get a prize.
So the way we're going to do this, we're going to open it up to you guys. Yours are the most important questions. We're going to ask 3 kind of CFO Leadership Council level questions here to lead off, to get the audience warmed up, and I will not accept any of the prizes, so we'll leave those for you guys. So Tim, what an incredible journey. Just 3 kind of high-level questions here that I think folks in the audience will find your answers to interesting. So number 1, we've got a lot of CFOs in the audience. We've also got a lot of controllers and VP finances, both in the room and on the webcast. So what advice, given your unique journey, what advice would you give to an aspiring CFO?
Yeah. I think I've alluded to this a number of times as I've pointed to the right, but I think that the most important thing that I've learned, and I've been fortunate over the last 17 years, is that the success, my own personal success or organization success, is much more a result of the people you put around you than yourself. And so I think that finding the right people, finding A-plus talent, identifying that talent, cultivating that talent, rewarding that talent, putting those people in positions to succeed, challenging them, giving them opportunities to grow, and building that team around you is probably what I think has been the most important factor of our success and my own personal growth. And so I'm going to sort of give a nod to my team over here, but really I think that's probably number 1, is the importance of surrounding yourself with incredibly talented people.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I'm sure many in the room agree as well. Second question for you here, and this one is interesting. So what is one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your CFO journey that you know now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny, as I think about that first slide, and I think about my journey in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, the first 10 years, and I made a joke, but it actually was serious, I was in Excel. That was pretty much the only thing I used. And I think what I wish I knew, which I now know now, is how important it is to embrace new technologies, be open to new technologies, adopt new technologies. The first 10 years, it was Excel and nothing else for me personally. And over the last 5 years, you've seen all the things we've done. We've integrated with all those new technology partners like Host. We're doing so much more. And so I think that I wish earlier on in my career I had just, and I've been a technology guy at heart, but I didn't embrace and adopt and look for innovative ways to use technologies to improve our processes as early as I maybe wish I had.
And what is the biggest challenge you've encountered, CFO role or otherwise, and how did you overcome that challenge?
You know, I think of the moment of my 17, 18-year career that I sort of, my eyes went, oh crap, was back in 2008. I was sort of, before my current role, I was in charge of our Red Sox travel program. So it was taking fans on the road. They could go, see the team on the road, and they'd meet a player. And so we were going to open the season in Japan that year, Tokyo, Japan. And my boss, our then COO, Mike D, had this idea that we wanted to take fans to Japan. And we were talking about the idea. We were saying, oh, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? One day he comes into my office and says, hey, great news. I just got off the phone with Japan Airlines. I just signed a contract for a charter. It's $1.3 million that we're going to spend on this charter. You have to fill it with fans. And I went, oh crap. And so I think that was sort of this moment of like, okay. And we had to basically find 250 Red Sox fans that were willing to spend $10,000 each to hop on a plane, fly to Tokyo, see a couple games, stay in Japan. That was daunting. And then we had to plan it, which was, in 2008, cell phones existed, but our cell phones didn't work in Japan that easily. It was a different time. So we had to plan this itinerary, this 5-day itinerary for 250 people. I remember for about 3 weeks straight, I was having these conference calls with people in Japan in the middle of the night, with people that didn't speak, the hotel guy, the tour operator guy. And then during the trip, and I'll maybe share more details of this during the cocktail hour, there were just a whole number of things that went wrong, but that ultimately that worked out okay. So at the end of the day, we sold enough packages that we didn't lose money on the 1.3 million. I think my boss actually just did it because he wanted to fly out in first class on this plane. That's why he did it, and I'm joking about that. But anyway, it turned out to be okay, but it was definitely probably my most challenging job.
And certainly helpful to know who the Richie Riches were and who the Bargain Bobs were.
Yeah,
right?
well, we didn't know back then. We didn't have any of this, so we were just flying blind. But anyway, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So we're going to open it up to the floor now. One word of reservation: no questions about Mookie Betts' 2021 free agency.
Right, you don't get a prize if you ask that. So.
Okay, maybe back here. You, sir. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thanks. So you brought up on one of the last slides about artificial intelligence, and it seems like, in related to ticketing, it would be an obvious place to go. Is that something you're looking into, the artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's certainly the first stop. And I would say, I like to use baseball analogies. We're in the first inning of this 9-inning game with artificial intelligence. We're just starting, but I do think that the ticket forecasting, the ticket pricing, the dynamic pricing, a lot of that stuff is sort of perfect for that type of analysis to help it, give a computer historical data, allow it to look for trends. So yes, that is absolutely where we're starting. We hope to adopt it in more areas. Our baseball people are doing it as well in some respects. They have humans watching video and charting video, and you can train computers to do that as well. So we're doing it on both sides, but we're just getting started. But yes, that is where we're starting. You can come up, as you ask a question, you can come up and grab a prize.
I'm wondering if you could spend a couple minutes talking about the people side of this. How is it that you convinced management to make these investments? I can see, your first phase up until I think it was 13 or 14 when it was just you. That was fine. But those incremental ads and the ads of the technology, what was the mental frame of mind in terms of making additional investments in this area?
Yeah,
How did that work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think what was important was a couple things. First of all, starting small, not trying to bite off everything in one bite, and proving the effectiveness of this data strategy to my boss, to Larry Lucchino at the time, who was the CEO, and then Sam Kennedy now, with just small victories. So doing smaller things myself that resulted in changes that worked. The start time analysis or some of the ticket pricing stuff. It was a slow evolution of embracing data, a data-driven culture that didn't happen overnight, but each time we delivered some sort of analysis or some sort of project that we believed helped was another ability to convince Larry and Sam that this is a journey that we want to be on. When it came time to start asking for more people and more investment, we'd already built up this sort of belief that we were doing things that were helpful, and we had already started that culture embracing, because it is important to have that buy-in from the top. Without that, without convincing your president or CEO or board or whatever the decision makers are, because these things do cost money, there's no question. There's an investment required in people and resources and technology, but we started slow. We had early successes that drove our sort of reputation of helping, and that allowed us the wiggle room to continue to have trust from above that allowed us to continue. And then continuing to show the results, continuing to put things in a framework that clearly said, look, we spent $25,000, we got $600,000. That's pretty good. Trust us. So I think that's trust and a culture change that happens over time, not overnight.
Thank you.
Yep. You can come up if you want to grab something.
Hi, over here. I just have a question around all the analytics around baseball. You asked to do anything for football, hockey games, concerts. Have you done it? And if you have, any interesting stories from those?
On the sales side, the business side, or on the player side?
No, on the sales side of concerts at Fenway Park. Have you done anything?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely are doing this. We're applying the same strategies in all of those areas. So when we most of our concerts, we're pretty lucky, sell out naturally. Most of the shows at Fenway Park, for the most part, there's just demand enough to sell them without a lot of effort. But occasionally, we'll find ourselves in situations where there's a couple, there's a show that has a few thousand tickets to sell, and we need to hit our customer data warehouse and look at the people. We've actually done some cross promotions where maybe we had a Grateful Dead night at Fenway Park in the past that had a free T-shirt, and then we had that list that allowed us to sell Grateful Dead tickets to a concert later. So we're definitely doing the exact same thing. And again, a lot of these events, the Winter Classic, the Notre Dame game, those sort of sold out naturally. That didn't require a lot of these efforts. But when an event does require it, we're adopting the exact same things for sure.
So I'm next door, so I was able to steal the microphone. As you think about then this finance team that's using all these integrated systems, right? What's your relationship with your technology team here to actually project plan, implement, and sync all these disparate systems so that you can then pull it through a data warehouse and then use a Tableau or otherwise? So what is your relationship with
I'm
technology?
actually very lucky that, and it wasn't always this way. So I was put in my current role overseeing the finance department in the fall of 2015. And then 2 years later, I was put in charge of the technology team. So that team rolls up to me. So I'm lucky that I actually oversee what I consider 3 different areas: finance, business analytics, and technology, all under one roof. But that makes that integration really easy. In some organizations, that's not the case, and you have to build a relationship with the technology head and convince them. For me, it's lucky that I get to, I oversee all 3. So that's easier for me, but not always the case.
And keeping it at table number 10 here, it sounds like when you started, you were getting a lot of information, the differential between the flat pricing that you were charging in the secondary market, and now that you've gone to variable dynamic pricing, have you lost the insight, that differential from StubHub or secondary market, or you still have it in a way, or it comes somewhere else?
We still have it. As those lines moved, we still track our primary, what we call our primary price, what we're offering on redsox.com, to what the tickets are ultimately selling for on average for StubHub. So we're still tracking that differential, and we still monitor that very closely. That multiple of face value, that concept of 1.1x, or in some cases 0.9x, that's a metric that we track very closely year to year, section to section, game to game, and that we're constantly drawing comparisons between those two. They're changing. In theory, you want that to become closer to 1, or just over 1 in our mind. But we're absolutely continuing to track that. And we're only doing dynamic pricing on the Green Monster. So that's the only area where the price has changed over time. If we set a price for opening day for a grandstand at $112, it stays there. Whether it goes, that doesn't change. So we're not doing dynamic pricing. A lot of other teams in sports are doing dynamic pricing across the board. We're not quite there yet, but so that's why we're still able to track that set price to the secondary price. I don't know who has the mic or who's controlling. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You described a number of different variables that you look at, and I'm not going to say that they were all individually, but a lot presented individually. A lot of times those variables have effect on each other, right? So maybe if you have a bobblehead night, maybe that affects the concessions and or affects the, so I'm curious to hear about what some of the most interesting or surprising things that you've seen that are interrelationships between those different factors?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is the importance of trying to isolate. If you're studying a question, trying to isolate that from other factors. So when you saw that bobblehead chart, we tried our best to pick a sample of games that we felt like were consistent in the month and the day of the night and the opponent, so that you could not, because else you'd say, well, yeah, that's higher because it's a Yankee game, et cetera. So isolating the variable when you're looking at it is one thing that's obviously very important. I'm trying to think if there's things that are interesting that we've noticed that are related, or nothing jumps out of something that sort of popped off the spreadsheet, so to speak, where that was surprising. Let me think about that, and maybe in the cocktail hour, I'll come back to you and try to find you as I think a little bit more about that one.
So kind of related to what Dan mentioned about Mookie, but there's been a lot of talk about getting under the luxury tax for the season. How much does the front office rely on you guys, if at all, for that for help with that? How much do you guys get involved with that?
Yeah, I mean, neither mine nor my team get involved much at all in the player decisions. So our role is rolling up the entire budget, making projections on revenues and non-player related expenses, and sort of rolling that up, to ownership and to say, okay, here's what all that looks like, and here's what the bottom line will look like at different payroll levels, and sort of, kind of back into what might make sense for a payroll number. And ownership ultimately is who sort of, tries to guide that payroll decision, and then allows Chaim and his team say, okay, this is our goal. And as they said before, that's a goal, not a mandate. There's not often a set finite number. In fact, I think every year I've been CFO, our final player payroll has exceeded our budget prior to the year. So it's not like it's like, okay, our budget's X, we can't go beyond that. Our ownership, they care first and foremost about winning, And so I think they've proven over their 17-year history, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but with the 4 World Series championships and being in contention many years, that they're willing to invest, they're willing to spend, they're willing to put a team on the field that wins. That's priority number one. Now, at the same time, they're still running a business, that there's a business component that they want to sort of manage in a responsible way. And so those are factors that are balancing. But they care, number one, about winning, and that payroll number is always a number that we're willing to exceed if there's a reason to. And in the past couple of years, we've actually grown. Our payroll has been quite a bit higher than anybody in the league. It's been number one by far. But again, I'm not involved really in those decisions at all. He's been waiting for a while. I keep seeing his hand go up, so I'm gonna.
You were talking about like dynamic data and many data fields that you mine, but how important is the competitiveness of the team in making some of those decisions, and how do you gather that data?
Yeah, well, it's certainly an enormous factor, and I think that we're actually luckier as the Red Sox that we're a little less reliant on team performance than other teams, because we have this sort of core loyal fan base that we never take for granted and appreciate, and there's people that want to come to Fenway just because it's a landmark that are going to come win or lose. So we sort of have this stronger base than most other teams, which helps us. But absolutely, and especially you see it in September. If the team's out of contention, which luckily the last several years we have not been, other than last year, ticket sales are much stronger than if the team's out of contention. So it's an absolute factor. There's a lot of, our baseball guys run projections on every single player. They run thousands and thousands of season simulations to predict what they think that our record's going to be relative to other teams. So going into the season, we generally have a decent idea of what the range of competitiveness is going to be. Now, look, 2012, we didn't think we were going to win 69 games, and 2014, we didn't think. So those are not always right, but they help guide our thinking around projections, and certainly an input for sure. In our Patrick runs a daily ticket model where he predicts how many tickets we're going to sell for every single game based on how many tickets are sold, how many days are left, what other factors, weather, et cetera. And team performance is absolutely an input in that, an important input in that.
Tim, over here. Sorry, with the extension of the netting, it'd be interesting to see how the heat map has changed.
Yeah.
And also, has that impacted your pricing in those areas?
So we haven't made the heat map since, but we know that they're not gone, but they're virtually gone, because the nets are pretty high and they go down pretty far, and so the line drives just hit the net now, and occasionally you might have a sort of a fly that gets over the net and maybe hits someone who's not paying attention, but the number of incidents is dramatically lower in terms of injuries since we put the nets in. So we haven't actually made the map, but I know it would look very, very. What was your second part of your question?
Has it impacted your
Oh, you know, not as much as we were a little worried. We did hear from season ticket holders for sure that complained and said, you know what, I don't like this net. People, I think, generally get used to it. I think they understood the need to do it. We did not see a noticeable decline in our season ticket renewal rates or pricing or anything like that.
So I think we have one final question here, and
I'm going to stick around. So like, if you had a question, I'll just be hanging out, mingling. If you come find me, if you want to ask, if you didn't get to ask a question.
In coming to the job as a math teacher, I was wondering if you came in knowing you wanted to implement data, or if the money ball of baseball sort of affected your approach to how you ran the finance department.
It's a really good question. I would say that I've always, since I was on the math team in 7th grade, like loved numbers and loved data. And so, you know, whether it was at MIT, because I went to MIT undergrad, whether it was at Bain & Company, they have a philosophy of using data and even as a math teacher, it's just been my calling card throughout my career. So I think when I got the opportunity to get the foot in the door here as an unpaid intern, it absolutely was the #1 thing that I wanted to do. I also realized that the incredible opportunity, because of the low-hanging fruit, because there was not a lot of being done at the time, I was able to do things that I felt like were, you know, relatively not rocket science, but sort of like were things they weren't doing. Like, wow, that's, you know, so there was a lot of opportunity. It was always been part of my professional career. It's always been sort of my calling card, like I said.
All right. Well, we want to thank Tim and the Boston Red Sox.
Thank you so much for putting this whole thing together. Like I said, they just wanted to do a great event for the membership, and this was fantastic. So if you don't already love Host, if you look in your name badges, you will see 2 little tickets for free drinks. So maybe that'll make you love them a little bit more. So anyway, thanks again. We've got the club for a while, I guess, and let's have a little fun. All right. Super. Good job. Thank you.